And I saw an airplane hit the tower. TV was obviously on, and I used to fly myself, and I said, well, there's one terrible pilot. And I saw an airplane hit the tower. TV was obviously on, and I used to fly myself, and I said, well, there's one terrible pilot. Terrible pilot, 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 terrible pilot.
It's kind of like, Orwell's 1984, when, these extreme lies are out there and they're fairly widely accepted.
All right, guys, welcome back to the Grimerica show. We got a great show lined up. We're going to be talking with Dr. Kevin Barrett about some false flag action a little bit later. How's it going, Graham?
Hey, buddy, I'm doing good. I'm happy to have our Kiwi ambassador of Grimerica from New Zealand on the line with us
and
for this intro.
And the Facebook face of Grimerica.
Welcome, Jared.
G'day. How are we?
Welcome back to the Igloo. We're good. We're good. It's night here. It's last night. We're in last night.
Almost
I'm
bedtime.
in the future.
You're in the future.
Or we're in the past.
I've already gotten over the hump.
Oh, yeah.
Wednesday, man.
Oh, right. Yeah, you're already there.
Yeah.
Why are you sending me all these pictures of you and your cat?
Does that mean you've already got Chive's hump day pictures on your phone?
Yep. And they've already changed the meme. It's been gone through so many different names, and it's there.
Chive. I haven't checked out the Chive in fucking months. Probably almost a year. I used to really like that daily. It has the day. I used to like the daily morning awesomeness and the the randomness and shit the best. I don't have time for that shit anymore.
So what's new, guys?
Oh, we're booked solid till almost mid-April now. So we're feeling pretty good. It's good.
That's awesome. Been working hard.
Yeah, it's been coming together.
Yeah, we got it laid out for a little bit. We're moving studio here in a couple of weeks.
So this is about your third move now?
No, the last time we just moved across the room.
We just
That still counts.
Yeah. Yeah.
You got to rearrange.
Yeah,
unplug,
exactly.
plug
We've
in.
been upgrading consistently. So
We keep getting new gear. We have to implement it, and then we seem to keep demanding more space.
So
nothing wrong with that.
we did go and see a 3D printer the other day. You want to talk about that, Darren?
Yeah, that was a cool little thing. A friend of mine his good friends are connected with some people that do a mold shop, I guess. They had all kinds of crazy molds there for melt crates and stuff, but they also do a lot of cool 3D printer stuff.
Yeah, and we're not talking just a little 3D printer. This is pretty industrial style 3D printer.
Yeah, it was
and
sweet.
you'll note on the Facebook page there is a picture of one of the cartridges for you to examine.
Oh yeah, that's right. I did put it on the Facebook page. $1,000 3D printer. Well, I guess you wouldn't call it ink.
How much does that create? Roughly speaking, how big is that thing?
Well, that would probably make let's say
That would probably make
20 moais,
no, that
the
would
size
make
of
more
a
than
big
that.
coffee mug.
Yeah, that would probably make 20 moais. 20 moais the size of a big coffee mug. So $50 a piece.
Wow. And that's the raw product. So you're talking if somebody's going to sell that going forward, you're still saying that 3D printing is still in the infant stage where it's incredibly expensive to make something.
Yeah, well, really, it's not near as expensive as I thought it was going to be. The real expense is getting the
3D drawings.
the drawing into a 3D model
Like a
with
rendering.
software. Yeah, you need to render it with software that the printer understands. And that's where the real cost is, I think, it was over $1,000 to get that done. But once that's done, I think, he said we could print them anywhere from, depends on what size we want to print them. Once we do it it's easily scalable and we'll be able to kind of print on demand.
But for one-off
Okay.
things, or for like a test piece, like in a manufacturing plant, like these guys do, production rolls of like thousands and millions of plastic pieces of this thing or that thing through injection molding or die casting or whatever. So for initial things, it's cheaper to actually do a 3D printer, right? It's cheaper to draw something up in 3D, print one out, than make a cast or a mold to try something out.
Yeah,
Yeah, well,
exactly. If we had a mold built for the Moai, we'd be spending like probably $10,000 or $15,000 to make a little trinket to sell on the website.
Wow.
Whereas this way, basically, you print them as you want them. We don't get stuck with an attic full of Moais. People order them
Yeah.
as they want it, and it comes out of hot off a 3D printer.
Not to sound too much like a grown-up kid, but I am a grown-up kid. When you see, like, I've watched a documentary on the Lego factory, and you look at the different, like the injection molding that they do for Lego, for instance, you sort of think, that's pretty straightforward. They're just printing out a couple of pieces, but each one of those molds themselves, they're $20,000, $30,000 for this piece of metal, just to pump it through. Something stupid.
They're all cool. They've got water lines in them, so you can cool the stuff quick enough. It's crazy.
Yeah. Have you
He
seen
said
that?
the mold for the fucking milk crate was worth $100,000 or something like that.
And it's huge. It's the size of a room for a milk crate.
Yeah. Have you seen that one where they can, it's almost like a big tank of liquid, and they line up the lasers underneath it, which then print within the liquid, so to speak. Have you seen those things before?
No.
It's a type of 3D printing, but it's in a medium.
Wow.
Underwater 3D printing.
Sort of. It's like you imagine just like this square tank. It's full of, like a cube. It's full of some sort of a liquid, and when the lasers line up on each other, it hardens around it, and they can just pretty much spit out whatever they want to.
Wow, that's crazy.
It's more like a fucking printer than you'd ever imagine. Like, we were in there and there was making a couple little brackets or something. And it was like just like a printer would, going over and just adding layers of plastic. And it could print movable parts on top. Like they've printed out of that printer an adjustable wrench. We call them monkey wrenches here. With the little fucking twist thing to move the jaw up and down.
You probably call them monkey spanners over there or something.
We call it a wrench.
A thumb.
We don't give it a title before the title. We just call it a wrench.
I know in Newfoundland they call it a thumb wrench, a tum wrench. Anyway, you know the style I'm talking about with the adjustable jaw.
Yeah,
They print that out, and it comes out 100% working.
And I think each layer is like 1/7 of a thousandth of an inch thick. So it's probably like, I think a human hair is somewhere around 4 thou. So that's like 10% the size of a human hair.
Wow. The whole inch thing still gets me there. It's
Oh,
like
right.
you're going in fractions of a fraction of a fraction. Why don't you just say like 0.5 millimeter? Done.
Well, it would be
Well, it's way
3
less than
micron.
that,
I think
though.
7 microns is somewhere in there. I can't remember.
You're probably
now.
talking like 10 thou of an inch is going to be
Don't even go there.
25. 10 thou divided by 25, you're going to say 400th of a millimeter. Either a 40th of a millimeter
Then
or
you're
a
down to
400th of a
microns.
millimeter.
Then you're down to microns. So.
Fuck off
Okay,
with the microns.
Isn't
You're
a piece of
micron.
tinfoil? A piece of tinfoil is about 12 microns, apparently.
Is it?
Yeah, we'll settle on that then.
Yeah, that's good.
Good.
Settled. We should take a minute and welcome our new listeners, new country, number 76 in our global takeover. Chile.
That's a peaceful takeover, by the way.
Peaceful takeover. Yeah, we're all cool.
Don't make it sound all aggressive.
Well, it's
a
passive
revolution.
aggressive.
Yeah,
Revolution, bitches. Yeah, welcome Chile. So that brings us a little step closer to taking over South America.
Chile.
Welcome Chile. Welcome aboard. I see they've
75th
downloaded a few
runner-up.
episodes right off the bat, so I always like to see when a new country comes in and they get hooked on our bullshit.
Oh, it's good bullshit.
Yeah, exactly. Which reminds to our Canadian listeners, if you have any friends in the Northwest Territories, you should tell them to download at least one episode, just so we can complete the takeover of our own country.
We were just telling Jared about that. He's like, "So what's the place called?" And we said, "Oh, it's the Northwest Territories." He's like, "What's the name?"
What's it called, man? Northwest Territories. Yeah.
How
What
creative.
do you call it then? Northwest Territories. So its name is Northwest Territories.
We snuck into Nunavut, which I'm pretty sure is fucking like nothing but ice and fucking Aboriginal
just
Indians
igloos.
and shit.
That's where
and
the
actual
true
fucking
igloos are.
igloos.
Yeah. Not like the igloo that we podcast out of.
But like fucking Northwest Territories has cities and shit. I'm surprised. Anyway, tell someone. I'll have none of
you know,
us.
we could just meditate on it and it would happen.
I've slept in an igloo before.
Have
My
you?
own. Built it. Yeah, everything.
I'm sleeping
Really,
in the
eh?
igloo tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
Where was that? That wasn't. Was that in New Zealand?
Antarctica,
or-
I bet.
Antarctica.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow, very cool.
We built it ourselves and slept in it, and it was daylight the whole time.
Wow.
Was it
Weird.
warm?
Was there any
yeah.
Was there any sun shining through the cracks of the igloo?
You have to. Did you have a fire and shit? Like a good one with the hole in the top and the fire in the middle and shit?
No, this is real basic. You just pile up all your backpacks, put a tarpaulin over it, dig a trench around it, throw the snow on top, and then dig out the tarpaulin, and that was it. But
Shitty igloo.
yeah, it wasn't the blocks. I was looking forward to building the blocks like Shamu and putting them all and stacking them up and doing some engineering. But it was pretty basic.
Cut the
But
blocks.
it worked and it was cool. Yeah.
Melt them together with fire sticks.
Well, the next morning, the whole ceiling was like a perfect dome, like it had melted and set. It was cool.
So yeah, we'll see what happens with the 3D printing anyway. It's definitely something we're considering for down the road, maybe having 3D printed moai.
Yeah.
Maybe you could 3D print an igloo. Like maybe
Yeah.
they should move because it's cheaper to use water than that $1,000 stuff, and
Well,
just
we'll-
have a freezer printer.
We'll sucker them in with the moais, and then we'll
And
start
print them
getting
out.
accessories.
We do
We
an
could
ice cube
frozen
tray.
moais.
You
Yeah,
gotta get the
exactly.
moai and igloo.
How about an ice cube tray with little mini igloos?
Then we'll start marketing to kids
You can
But
drink.
it just
as
prints the
toys.
ice.
Or we'll get out of the podcast game altogether and just sell stone moai toys. Money Bomb, I guess we're going to start sort of getting the ball rolling on the Money Bomb plan. We'll start accepting. The main thing is we just want some postcards. So if you send us a postcard, we will throw you in whenever we start the Money Bomb, you'll be in the draw.
Yeah, the THC, the Higher Side Chats, their money bomb is going really good. So this month, I think they've got over $700-800 in donations. So half of that is going to go to a lucky listener. So we want to do the same thing eventually. So we're thinking for now, if you send a postcard, we will make sure that you get in the first money bomb whenever that does happen. Right, Darren? Yeah,
Yeah, that's right. And
Okay,
of course, you can send the postcards
Oh.
to the Grimerica Show, P.O. Box
16033.
815 17th Avenue Southwest, Calgary, Alberta, Canada.
Yeah, and get this, we have a postal code, not a zip code, and it's T2T5H7.
There you go. And that's where you can send my 33rd birthday gifts as well.
33rd? That's a.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking that's fucked up.
Are you only
somewhere.
33?
Yeah, I'm turning 33.
When?
Is that like a magic year or something?
When is that?
On the 10th.
Of
Only if you're a Freemason.
yeah.
My grandpa was a Freemason.
Really?
33.
Yeah. And my uncle.
Really?
Get your uncle on the show.
He passed away years ago.
Get a Ouija board.
Oh.
Ouija boards are bad news, man.
No, I'd rather use a medium.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You spoke to a
Well,
medium
let's-
the other day.
Did you? How'd that
You
go?
did.
Chris Conway.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, we did. Yeah.
On
It
a
was
boat.
kind of a rough conversation. It was like there was like a fucking 10-second delay in between us and them, and the
And
boat. We got a bit of gold out of there, but
getting Scotty and John to shut up for a bit so Chris could talk was a challenge.
It was a good show, though. I enjoyed it.
Oh, good. Glad to hear
yeah.
that.
Apologize if the music was a little bit much for some people, but some things fit too good to pass up. So yeah, send the
Nice.
postcards. We love to see the postcards, and then maybe we'll pick a day here in over the next few shows and get this thing fired up.
Yeah. Thanks to THC for coming up with the money bomb idea. So I got a new segment for you guys I want to do every week.
Every week.
Every week. Otherwise, it wouldn't be
Every
a
single-
segment. Every single
Every
week.
single
Yeah.
individual week.
Yeah. It's a short, really short segment.
Fire away.
Let's see how
Okay,
it goes the
so-
first week. Let's start with 1 week.
Okay, so it's what it's going to be is every week I'm going to read a profound quote about UFOs.
And that's it?
That's it.
That's the segment?
Yeah.
Nothing to do with cats.
Nothing
Well,
to do with all
maybe
these
I
cat
can-
pictures you've been texting me of you snuggling up to your cat. Maybe I'll put these in the show notes.
Let's leave that for another time. So now I can't even read
okay.
the quote because you got me laughing. So
Okay, no,
I'm
read
going
the
to start
quote.
off. So
Okay, serious mode.
now
Serious
Yeah.
mode.
I can't back all these up, but I have an old list of a whole schwack of quotes here, so I want to read one every week. So the first one is maybe we need a jingle for it or something like that.
Drum roll.
So the first one is, it is time for the truth to be brought out in open congressional hearings. Behind the scenes, high-ranking Air Force officers are soberly concerned about the UFOs. But through official secrecy and ridicule, many citizens are led to believe the unknown flying objects are nonsense. And that is from Admiral Helen Cotter, the first director of the CIA from 1947 to 1950, and that was on February 27th, 1960.
Hey, I like it. I got a better idea. Let's
No, no.
let's do it. Is that the end of the quote?
No, well, I was going to do for the first week, I was going to do 2.
Oh. Okay.
Is that okay?
It's a big week.
It's a big week. I got a lot to choose from
It's
here.
the first week.
So what if the next time we both have a copy of the quotes and we try and sneak quotes into regular conversation and see if we can pick out when the other person is using a quote?
Oh my God.
That's
Sounds
too
really
crazy?
complicated.
Yeah, it does sound a little complicated.
Okay, here we go. The type of UFO reports that are most intriguing are close-range sightings of machine-like objects of unconventional nature and unconventional performance characteristics, seen at low altitudes and sometimes even on the ground. The general public is entirely unaware of the large number of such reports that are coming from credible witnesses. When one starts searching for such cases, their number are quite astonishing. Also, such sightings appear to be occurring all over the globe. Hearings before the Committee on Science and Astronautics, U.S. House of Representatives, July 29th, 1968. That was from Dr. James E. McDonald, senior physicist at the Institute of Atmospheric Physics at the University of Arizona.
Beautiful.
Thanks, buddy. What do you think?
Well done.
What do you think, Jared? Is that a go?
Sneaking quotes into this combo. So
Yeah, I
then we'll have
I
like
think-
buzzers or something that are like, "Bzzz, that was a quote.
I think you need better intro music though.
Okay.
Something like the X-Files. Maybe we'll just
Oh.
use the one from the X-Files.
Something on a theremin.
Oh, a theremin.
Yeah, get a theremin involved.
What's a theremin?
That's what it's all
You know what I
about.
want to get? You know what I fucking want to get one day is a didgeridoo.
I just saw one. I was at one not too
We're
long
at a
ago.
didgeridoo.
At one.
I was at a concert called the Heart Resonance. Did I talk about that on the show?
don't
And
think
there was
so. Is
all
that
these
anything
ancient
to do with
instruments and
Heart,
stuff like that.
Oh yeah, we kind of touched on
Yeah.
that. I think. Yeah, I want.
I've got a recording of it.
I want to get me a didgeridoo, man.
Okay, I'm going to
It's on
take
the
you to
list.
this place where they'll have them. Okay.
No, I think they're pretty expensive. I don't think I'm going to get one like right away. It's just on my like list of things to get one day and learn how to play.
Maybe I could get one over here, like from Aussie. Get it over here and send it over to you because it's closer, you know.
Could you
Is
just
that
get
where
one
they're
out of the
from,
bush?
is
Or?
Oz?
Yeah, they're Australian.
So it's our neighbour.
I wonder if they're cheaper over there than
Yeah,
over
they're
here.
probably cheaper over there, eh?
Or I could use the Amazon portal and get it shipped to you using
that-
my own address from there.
They'll be onto that in no time. Those motherfuckers. Those Amazon, they're smart cookies.
Not
They're
if I
gonna
keep a straight
fucking
face.
sue me one of these days. Is what's gonna happen. But for now, keep rocking the Grimerica Amazon portal.
Be on my credit card. I'm a Kiwi.
Yeah, it might
True
work.
that.
We can look into it.
Send as a gift, you know.
Did we talk about the passport? Oh, we did. We talked
Yeah, I
about
think
that.
we
on the-
talked.
Yeah,
about
you
it.
did. What about the solar flare today? Anybody get into that?
Oh,
Was
no.
when I was looking at fucking solar lenses for my telescope.
Can
They're
you
like
grab that
$200
book?
bucks, and I can fucking put a solar lens on it so I can look on the sun with my telescope. That'd be pretty cool, I think.
Well, they had a solar flare today. It was like moving out at 7.1 kilometers an hour.
Who's they?
NASA. You know, those guys.
They had a solar flare?
Well, there was a solar ejection today. It is Wednesday, though, so you guys are probably catching up.
Hasn't happened here yet.
A massive coronal ejection, and it's moving through space at about 2,000 kilometers a second.
So it already missed us.
Yeah, well, it was going the other way, so it's all right.
Beauty. Dodged another one.
No, I just brought a book over here by Robert Schock, and it's called Forgotten Civilization, and it's the role of solar outbursts in our past and future. So I just heard him talking on Jim Harold's podcast, actually, who we talked to tonight, and he was talking about how the solar outbursts affected the civilization, like after the Ice Age there. Yeah, crazy shit. And he talked about the Carrington event, too.
I was just listening to the Higher Side chats from a couple weeks ago when they were talking about the crustal displacement and shit like that.
Yeah, it was a
I
good
love
show.
that shit.
That was cool. That was very cool.
That's my favorite.
Things like moving around the outside that's still moving. It's not plate tectonics. It's just the whole shebang moving.
Yeah. Earth crust displacement theory, I think they call it.
Yeah. It's crazy.
It's cool.
So this solar outburst, is it seriously going the other way? Or are you just kidding?
Yes, it is.
Is it really?
No,
It actually goes one way?
How do they see it if it's going the other way?
Oh,
How
just
do they
send you a
catch
link.
it? How do they catch up to it?
They've got someone up there having a look, and they just checked it out and saw it, and this thing went, and it just went nuts. Massive thing.
Really?
Yeah.
Do they know how that compares to
Biggest
the
of
Carrington
the
event?
year.
If it came this way? Oh, it's just the biggest of the year? Oh, it's the biggest of 2014, and we're only 2 months in.
Well, it's on their scale. I don't know what it really means, but it's a massive X4.9 class solar flare. It's called AR1990, and NASA's Solar Dynamics Observatory captured it in high def, and yeah, there it is. I just sent it through to you.
Wow.
That's cool, and the different colors and shit. See, that's the shit I want to see on my telescope. I'll see the Carrington event coming in real time.
Be too late.
Hey, can we have one more quote, Graham?
About
Come
what?
on, UFOs.
Really?
Yeah, man.
I'm happy you guys are asking me for another one here.
It's your debut.
Okay, I'll just pick one randomly here. Headquarters. I knew some effect was coming. Headquarters wouldn't let us go after it, and we played around a little bit. We got to watching how it made 90-degree turns at its high speed and everything. We knew it wasn't a missile of any type, so then we confirmed it with the radar control station, and they kept following it. And then it crashed somewhere off between Texas and the Mexico border. And that's from Colonel Robert Willingham, U.S. Air Force, from a sworn affidavit in the 1970s when discussing a sighting of a UFO while he was navigating an F-94 jet on September 6, 1950.
That was fucking awesome.
Beautiful.
That was like, you were just taken back, like in a movie when they go back to a Dreamtime sort of scene, and, you're going back in history. That was awesome. You should do this every week.
Yeah, well, that's the segment.
Yeah, except I'll find a cooler effect.
Yeah, no, let's lose the effects.
We'll find a cool effect. That sounds super awesome. We can take this, we can elevate it. Really take it to the...
Levitate it?
Elevate it.
Use a flanger.
Elevate the levitate.
Hey, the other one too today is Bitcoin. There's some shit going on with Bitcoin today.
Hey, I heard something about that. I didn't hear much. Maybe did you tell me something about it?
Yeah, something about Mount Fox or something like that, where it's just lost a huge amount of money on the Bitcoin. I don't know enough about this sort of stuff to really get into it.
Bitcoin is fucked.
Yeah, it is weird. All these people like, it is a bit weird for me. It's virtual money. I don't understand it enough, but by the sounds of it, there's been a big hole found in it today.
Sounds like it. It always seemed kind of scammy to me, just like Mars One.
A big hole found in it, like a gap in a theory, kind of, or a gap in the principle.
Well, something's just disappeared. A big chunk of it's disappeared.
Oh wow!
Bitcoin heist. Somebody robbed a Bitcoin bank.
Something like that. Or there's some page that's just disappeared. Mount Gox. Sorry, it was Fox, but Gox has disappeared somewhere. Which, yeah. I mean, like I say, I don't know enough about it to get too far into it, but it's just gone.
Bitcoin's like AOL, and then Google's going to come along and take over the planet.
Fair enough.
There's
Maybe
a lot of
Google.
that talk in fucking that Estland book.
Really?
All kinds of that.
Really?
Which book?
That's Trans Evolution, The Coming Age of Human Destruction by Daniel Estelen. So get this. I'm reading Darren's got me this book here. It just came in today. And I'm like, he's an award-winning investigative journalist and best-selling author of the true story of the Bilderberger Group. And I'm
Bilderberger Group? What is that, a fast food chain?
the Bilderberg Group. And I thought that sounds awfully familiar. And I look at my phone, and I've actually got the audiobook. I'm a couple hours into the audiobook. I've had it in my phone for quite a while. But, yeah, so I've already been listening to Daniel without even knowing it.
Oh, it looks like one of these Bitcoin exchange just disappeared with 365 million. Look, this guy's holding a sign that says, Mount Gox, where's my money?
Yeah, that's what came up today.
Wow.
Wow, wow, wow. That's not good for business.
It's not a surprise, though.
No, it's not a surprise. That's not good for Bitcoin. I wonder what that did to the fucking exchange of Bitcoin.
Well, it's only going to affect Bitcoin, though.
You know that-
apparently.
You know that there's going to be a conspiracy behind how this happened, right?
Of course. There's a conspiracy behind Bitcoin.
Maybe it was the
No, but I mean about
maybe
the
it was the
collapse of
fucking
it.
colonel from KFC.
That beady-eyed.
How the hell did you make that connection?
Oh, it's from Austin Powers. I was going to say, have you ever seen So I Married an Axe Murderer?
Yeah.
Yeah. He talks about the Illuminati, but he calls it the something else. I think we've played it on the podcast.
Bilderbergers?
Yeah. No, it's hilarious.
I said it because you just said Bilderberger. So I said maybe it was the KFC guy.
What a burger.
That's funny.
Anyway, it's the Bilderberg group, of course. But yeah, it's that's what that transhumanism is. It goes from like Bilderberg shit right into swarms into transhumanism and us turning into slave robots, or just fucking memory for fucking Google's whatever.
Mainframe in Idaho.
Yep, in a mainframe in Idaho or Ohio or wherever the mainframe is. Probably everywhere.
It's wherever the people are.
I feel like you're probably in the mainframe right now.
I am.
How can you tell?
You just kind of glazed over
I've
there.
got that look. Because I'm actually trying to type notes at the same time here.
I think that on that note, I think that about wraps it. Actually, no, we should before we go, we should talk about Dr. Kevin Barrett coming up. We haven't even touched on that yet. We should touch on that a bit. Of course, I'm pretty sure he was made famous, or not. I guess not made famous, but his life took a drastic turn, and it was all started with 9/11. But we get into a lot more than that, and false flag operations, and U.S. military, and all sorts of fun stuff.
Have you looked into that at all, Jared? Oh, Jared's gone.
Jared's gone.
Anyways, yeah,
That's a good thing about video. We could see that he's left.
It was kind of a bit freaky because it's a little out of our element. This whole 9/11 thing, But it was great to chat with Kevin, and I'm glad we did it. And maybe we can explore more of these kind of deeper conspiracies.
Yeah, exactly. You can't be scared to listen to them all. Is in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah,
Everyone gets a stage in Grimerica.
that's right. All right. Well, thanks a lot, Darren, and we'll get on with this chat.
Have you ever heard of Kevin Barrett? Garrett, have you listened to much of his stuff? Or
Yeah, in the circles. I've been interested in 9/11 stuff for a long time, and yeah, to me anyway, the Pentagon thing has got to be the biggest standout to what went on there. There's so many holes in that story.
and then what? Yeah, and then he was talking about. He starts. We'll let the interview speak for itself. It's definitely there's all kinds of holes, and it's kind of ironic because I'd actually just watched
Loose change.
Loose Change right before. Actually, it was one of his Twitter name's Terrence McKenna or something. Terrence McKenna, I think, tweeted me that as one of our guest suggestions. So I emailed him and he said yes right away. But it was kind of ironic. It was right after, like 2 days after I watched Loose Change.
Oh, I see what you mean. You
That was
manifested
the first
it.
time I ever seen Loose Change.
Yeah, you manifested it.
But that's the first thing I ever saw on 9/11 was Loose Change, and I think that is, for a lot of people, that is one of the more prolific documentaries out there.
It's so slow going, though. It's like,
Yeah, well, you probably would have seen like the third or fourth version of it, but right off the bat, like I remember seeing it when it was sort of first past the post, and yeah, it was enough to open my eyes.
what do you think? So you think U.S. government?
You don't have
No,
to
I
say
think
it like
it's-
that.
Maybe we should. That's a bad way to say that, probably. Hello. We just got dropped in.
Just call it the Bilderbergers or the Illuminati or something.
Or Burger King, or whatever.
KFC.
the Colonel.
I think it's deeper. I think it goes way back.
The elite,
So-
more powerful. Maybe it's the alien.
There's some sort of Israeli connection there.
Yeah, he goes into that.
I don't know. I mean, it's all I know is what I saw on that day, and what they're trying to say is they don't add up. That's just my opinion, apparently.
Well, I know a lot of people share that opinion with you. I'm still kind of on the fence of exactly who pulled it off, but it definitely doesn't seem like with all you hear the pilots talking about how they think how it would be difficult for one plane to pull it off, let alone two in a row. 2 out of 2 is almost impossible.
And again, it goes back to the Pentagon, like for one of those aircraft to hit that building at the angle of approach that it did without, belly flopping onto the front lawn there. There's so much about it without no recognition of a tailplane, no recognition of any piece of like aeronautical equipment, whatever.
For me, it's about the Building 7, like how that looks like a controlled demolition. And then also, if you look at all the tiny little bullet points together, like if one of them on its own might not mean a conspiracy, but when you look at all the little things like the insurance and the maintenance that was being done and all those, that security was, what's his name's brother's company. I mean, there's all these things, like if you just add them all up, like it's just, it's too
Something's
coincidental.
gonna miss.
Yeah, just simple stuff. The buildings were full of asbestos, and it was going to cost them millions to get it out and replace it and do something else with it, whatever. Silverstein getting insurance just before it all happened,
Yeah,
and
people
then
being told
claiming,
not to go in there.
yeah, then claiming that it was 2 separate incidents, and trying to get double the amount of insurance back from it.
I think he even won that.
Probably did.
I think he
Well,
won. I
he-
could be wrong.
Well, maybe the Illuminati
probably
did
use
one,
someone.
and maybe Osama did the other one.
Did he even?
I doubt it.
Did he even have anything to do with it? He was just a scapegoat.
Yeah.
He's dead in the ocean now. So
Apparently,
Allegedly.
we're not going to know because there's no proof of that. It just sort of happened one day, and whoop, there you go.
oop. Don't look over here.
No photos though, and we're going to stick to the religious rites of what happened.
Well, on that note, I think we'll let Dr. Barrett take it from there. He definitely does it quite eloquently. So we'd like to thank you for joining us, Jared. Graham, if you got nothing else, I think we'll take a quick break here and then jam into our interview with Dr. Kevin Barrett. Okay, guys, with us in Grimerica tonight, we'll be talking with Dr. Kevin Barrett about, among other things, some 9/11 stuff and about his radio program, Truth Jihad Radio. But first, as always, how's it going tonight, Graham?
Hey, Darren, I'm doing pretty good, man. Good to be here. We have, like you mentioned, we have Dr. Kevin Barrett here. He's got his radio show, Truth Jihad Radio. He's got his doctorate in African languages. And he's also recently the editor at Veterans Today and an op-ed writer at Press TV. And you've seen Kevin all over YouTube. He's been on all kinds of mainstream TV and radio shows. So it's really good to have you on tonight, Kevin. Welcome to Grimerica.
Well, it's good to be with you, Darren and Graham.
So I guess I want to start with kind of what's new with you. There's a lot of content out there. A lot of it goes back to like the mid 2000s. So what's the latest and greatest going on?
Well, I guess I'm kind of stuck now, instead of devoting my life to getting tenure and then writing erudite tomes on Moroccan Sufism, comparing the miraculous, legends and happenings of the Middle Ages to the bizarre personal experience narratives of today, and meditating on Islamic spirituality in Morocco, which was kind of my original career plan. I've now found a niche as maybe the world's leading Muslim conspiracy op-ed writer and broadcaster. And so I'm, one thing I really like to work at is to try to write, the world's greatest op-eds, which isn't that tough of a field to compete in, really. I mean, if you read stuff in the New York Times and the Washington Post, much less your local paper, I mean, there's hardly anything that's any good. And, Paul Craig Roberts writes pretty good rants these days. He used to write for the Wall Street Journal, but then, he got a little too serious when he got pissed off about 9/11. And so, he's stuck in the same alternative fields I am. So my aim now is to write op-eds that are, even better than those of Paul Craig Roberts and Gordon Duff, my friend at Veterans Today and people like that. And I think I'm doing pretty well at combining, good stuff with popular stuff. I'm getting a lot of reads at Press TV, which is the Iranian language English media outlet. So I'm just, trying to get better and better at this op-ed writing thing and then put out more and more interesting radio shows like you guys are doing.
Well, we try anyway.
So if you invited me, you must be good.
Oh, yeah, of course. So how about your Truth Jihad Radio then? You do that how often and what do you guys basically do there?
Well, that's been going on since 2006. I started out on RBN, Republic Broadcasting, which is run by this character named John Statmiller, who started the Michigan Militia, which gives you a sense of the kind of guy he is. He's a very intense character and a little kind of infamous in alternative media circles. He has been known to play with guns and things like that. He's quite a guy. Anyway, so I got my start with him, and the first person he put me on with when he offered me a substitute slot for Jim Fetzer's show was this guy, John Kaminsky, who's he was a former mainstream journalist who I think just got totally fed up with the Zionists running the media. And then he went crazy maybe just went a little extreme and became rabidly anti-Jewish. And I didn't know anything really about this guy. So, I did a quick study on him before I did the show. And, we talked the first hour agreeing about 9/11 and things like that. And then the second hour I brought up, John, some of the things you say about Jewish people are a little extreme. And he just unloaded with this, incredible torrent of invective. And then in the break, John Stadmiller came on and said, if you want to throw this guy off, it wouldn't bother me. He said, I'm afraid the ADL is going to get on my butt. so I traded insults with Kaminsky for a while and then threw him off the air. That was my introduction to alternative radio.
Oh, boy.
And it's been crazy and fun ever since. And I really do try to bring on people that are telling important truths that are totally just not there in the mainstream. The more important it is and the more censored it is, the more I want to cover it.
So was it 9/11 for you that kind of, like you were saying, you had one kind of life path planned for yourself and it kind of did a 180 on you? Is 9/11 what stirred the pot?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if it hadn't been for that, I probably would be, stuck in some university. I guess by now I'd probably have tenure. And, there would be a good side to that, I suppose. But yeah, it was just, 9/11 was going too far. I mean, I was already, I'm not stupid. I mean, I knew that JFK was an inside job from, junior high school. And I knew that the U.S. government is one of the world's biggest criminals, biggest terrorist organization that's killed probably tens of millions of people and these evil, undeclared, unconstitutional wars. I mean, I knew all that stuff. Yeah. But, I did my year of activism fighting for the nuclear freeze back in 1985 or something, 84. And I hadn't really planned on getting back into it in a big way. But 9/11, that was just too much. They really went too far. Just blowing up those 3 skyscrapers in broad daylight like that and lying through their teeth about it in that just over the top, extreme way, and triggering what's it's intended to be at least 100-year genocidal war on Muslims, and this is unacceptable. So I just couldn't see myself sticking my head in the sand for 10 years trying to get tenure and towing the line and curbing my tongue like you have to in the university. So I started doing teach-ins on 9/11, and I did, I wasn't sure they were necessarily going to kill my career for it. In fact, just doing teach-ins didn't kill my career at all. I was still teaching it at the University of Wisconsin, and I had an offer, even while I was doing these 9/11 teach-ins, from the University of California to do a postdoc that was sponsored by the Ford Foundation, and it would have basically paid me $60,000 to sit there and write whatever I wanted to write. I was supposed to do some ethnography studying African Muslim immigrants. And so I almost took that. In fact, I did accept it. And then later I got pissed off at the Ford Foundation, which was supplying the money for it. The Ford Foundation, it turns out, is a big CIA money conduit. And when they, their money was propping up Amy Goodman and her 9/11 nonsense. And, when they brought on David Ray Griffin and then ambushed him with Chip Burley, who's a professional anti-conspiracy guy, and just did a really deceptive show on Democracy Now! Right. That pissed me off so much. She's taken all this money from Ford Foundation that's basically telling, it was officially to report on the aftermath of 9/11. It was all hush money, saying, Amy, just support this genocidal official story. Right. And so she did. So this whole thing just pissed me off so much. I said, forget it. I turned down that Ford Foundation thing, which was the best thing that anybody in my program at Wisconsin had ever been offered out of graduate school. So I stupidly turned that down and just hung around Madison teaching Islam, Arabic, and what else? Folklore. And so while I was teaching these classes, I was doing teach-ins on the mall on 9/11. And it was no problem. I didn't really bring 9/11 into my classes very much. I think I did like a little tiny bit of it in folklore. We did like a unit on, urban legends and conspiracy theories. Mm-hmm. And of course, I taught it in a slightly subversive way, but I wasn't beating the drums or anything. I had no problem. I had the grandson of the most famous Republican governor in Wisconsin, Lee Dreyfus. His grandson was in my folklore class, went through the 9/11 unit, had no problem with it. So everything was cool. But then in 2006, I guess that was when the Karl Rove and Lynn Cheney decided that it was time to push back against the professors who were joining Scholars for 9/11 Truth. They needed somebody to hold up as a bad example. So, say to the other professors, hey, if you talk about 9/11, look what could happen to you. Mm-hmm. So they chose me. And a bunch of Republican state legislators working for Karl Rove and Lynn Cheney witch hunted me, saying I should be fired from the university. And I fought back. It became a huge sort of media circus. And that's what forced me out of academia and into alternative media. So here we are.
Wow, they've created a monster.
Yeah, that's really my long-term goal, is to make them regret that they ever went after me.
So I was just watching a speech of yours the other day, and I was wondering if you couldn't lay out for some of our listeners. It was kind of, you had laid out some of the major wars in American history, going back to the war with the Spanish through World War II, and kind of painted a picture that I had never heard before.
Well, you could even go back to the Boston Massacre. There are people who say that, Sam Adams and those guys might have sort of inflamed things in such a way as to provoke a massacre that could be used to rile up the people to fight the British. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but if you go to the Mexican War, 1847-48, then you got, a fake Mexican invasion of America. It was really a U.S. invasion of Mexico. They sent the troops into Mexico, started a firefight, and then they reported in the newspapers that the evil Mexicans had attacked America. And so the attack on America and the newspaper headlines led to this war of aggression in which the U.S. seized almost half of Mexico's territory, which is pretty much everything west of the Mississippi. And then the same kind of thing happened again with the Spanish-American War. That was when Hearst said, you give me the pictures, I'll give you the war, to his correspondent. And the correspondent said, there's nothing happening here. And Hearst said, just you wait. And sure enough, the battleship Maine blows up in Havana Harbor, and they blame the Spanish. One thing every historian agrees on today is that it was not the Spanish that blew up the battleship Maine. They're usually too shy to say it was probably a false flag. So they say, well, maybe it was an accident or something, but it wasn't the Spanish that intentionally did that, because, the Spanish were weak and the U.S. coveted Spain's colonies. So it was one of those situations where, the powers that be have to make it look like we're being attacked in order to launch their war of aggression. If you go to the American people and you say, let's have a war of aggression, let's go steal somebody else's land and resources, the American people say, we can think of something better to do with our taxpayers' money. But if you say, oh, these evil foreigners are attacking us, then everybody panics and falls into line. So they did that, and they stole these very valuable colonies from Spain, especially the Philippines. And this, once again, for run up to the U.S. involvement in World War I, the Lusitania was packed with passengers and armaments. And the Germans had already warned the U.S. that if it kept sending armaments to the British, the German U-boats were going to sink them. And so they put the passengers and the armaments on the ship and sent it straight into a fleet of U-boats with predictable consequences. And there's some evidence that there was even sort of manipulation of the path of the ship to make sure it got sunk. Yeah. And so that inflamed public opinion and created the climate that led the U.S. to enter World War I on behalf of Zionism, because what that was really all about was that the Rothschild family made a deal with the British in the middle of World War I. When the British were about to surrender, or rather to have a truce, the Rothschilds said, don't have peace yet, because we can win the war for you. All you have to do is give us Palestine. And the British did that. It's okay. Here's the Balfour Declaration, Jewish homeland in Palestine. It's all yours. The Rothschilds then used their money assets to break Germany's credit. They extended credit to the British, and then most importantly, they brought the U.S. into the war by mobilizing their control over the U.S. media and political system. So that was that's how the U.S. got into World War I, which is a war that no history professor could possibly explain why America had any business fighting it, or even why anybody did for that matter. And that's because they're afraid to talk about the Zionists. Then in World War II, we had Pearl Harbor. And that was the result of an 8-point plan drafted by Roosevelt's people and with Churchill behind it to make sure that the Japanese, quote unquote, fired the first shot. It's very important that Japan must be seen to have fired the first shot, says Roosevelt. And so they put into place an 8-point plan. They cut off Japan's oil and basically forced Japan to attack. Japan has no other choice. And then U.S. and British had broken the code. They knew when the attack was coming, and rather than defending anybody, they just let the Japanese slaughter over 2,000 Americans in order to inflame public opinion and bring the U.S. into the war. At that time, it was like 85% polls saying, no, we don't want to go to war. So it's over and over and over. With Korea, there was, they specifically drew a line and said, everything on this side of the line we'll defend, everything on that side we won't. Korea was on the side that we won't. So it was like an invitation, like, hey, come on, communists, go ahead, invade South Korea, reunify Korea. And then, boom, once that happens, the media goes into action and says, evil communists invade South Korea. Vietnam, we had the Gulf of Tonkin incident, which led to the resolution that brought us into Vietnam in a big way. And once again, that never happened. The newspaper headlines screamed out, evil North Vietnamese attack American boat. It didn't happen. It was just a manufactured incident that was designed to inflame public opinion and bring the U.S. to war. And in 1962, shortly before that, there had been a plan to actually murder hundreds of Americans in false flag terror attacks blamed on Cuba to go to war with Cuba. It was called Operation Northwoods. Every member of the Joint Chiefs signed off on this plan to mass murder Americans, and nobody would know about it except for one copy of that survived. It was McNamara's copy. And fast forward to Iraq War I. The Bush family public relation firm Hill and Knowlton produced this nurse Nasira, who was supposedly a nurse in a Kuwaiti hospital who'd witnessed evil Iraqi soldiers bashing babies to death on the cold hard floor. And once again, this was complete BS. Turns out that Nurse Nasira was really the Kuwaiti ambassador's daughter who was coached in her lines by Hill and Knowlton, the PR firm. So we go to war. That was what brought us to war. If it hadn't been for that testimony that brought tears to the eyes of Congress and the American people, there would have been no Iraq War I. And then with 9/11, if 9/11 really was a foreign attack, this would be the first time in history. It would be a real anomaly. But guess what? It wasn't. It was just the same old, same old.
So some of these things are actually accepted as false flags in a way, even by the mainstream. Yet, even though there's that acknowledgement there at some level, it still doesn't seem to change anything or wake anybody up. I mean, I guess people are waking up all the time, but I'm talking about kind of the mainstream.
Well, yeah, I think it's almost accepted, by the power elite that there's kind of a double speak that goes on. They speak with one voice to those in the know with little nods and winks, and another voice to the people who they assume are really dumb sheep who have to be manipulated and herded. And it's Leo Strauss, who founded neoconservatism, really put a huge emphasis on this and, led to his disciples, people like Wolfowitz, Pearl, and those guys, to be really extreme in the way they use doublespeak to communicate. In fact, Leo Strauss's whole theory of classical writing and philosophy is that all of the great philosophers have always written in this doublespeak. According to Leo Strauss, the truth is too destructive, and critical reason is too destructive to be allowed to fall into the hands of the masses. So truth and the critical reason that can find it must be reserved as the province of an elite. And this elite is going to be a very ruthless elite that's going to believe that it has the power and capacity to do whatever it wants to preserve its own power. Strauss said the only natural right is the natural right of the strong to rule the weak. And to do that, they should invent these myths, these big lies to manipulate the masses, and they should communicate in doublespeak. Everything they say should have a surface level to brainwash the masses and a hidden level to wink at the other members of this ruthless elite so they know what you're doing. And I think in framing this sick satanic philosophy, Strauss, in a way, was really just commenting on something that really does go on. And, I think, for example, there's this book by Roberta Wohlstetter that's called Pearl Harbor. I think it's Day of Decision or something. And this book, by the wife of Albert Wohlstetter, who was Paul Wolfowitz's mentor, well, along with Strauss. Strauss and Wohlstetter were both these, arch-Zionist, neocon geniuses who mentored Wolfowitz. And so this book by Wohlstetter's wife on Pearl Harbor is written at this double level. If a normal American reads this book, they are going to get the message that Pearl Harbor was this perfidious Japanese surprise attack that we didn't know was coming. But if you're hip to the neocon doublespeak, you can see that the way she writes and uses words and puts in a little word here that doesn't quite belong and nods and winks at you, she knows that it was a setup. And she approves of it. And that is the attitude of the neocons. They all essentially understand that Pearl Harbor was manufactured by the U.S. And they approve of it because they're almost all radical Jewish Zionists who, for I think pretty good reasons, hate Hitler. And the U.S. was never going to get into that war against Hitler unless that kind of provocation were engineered. Hitler wasn't going to attack the U.S. So the only way to get into World War II was to do something like this. And so the neocons approve of this. For them, Hitler was the ultimate evil. The U.S. had to be brought into that war. So Roosevelt and Churchill were doing a wonderful thing to manufacture this big lie to get the people to go to war. And that's their whole philosophy, is the people are stupid sheep that have to be led by the nose to do the things that the elite knows they should do.
So when you talk about 9/11, when you first got involved in this and you changed your path, and you mentioned you're getting sick of the lies and the people lying, so I guess that would be the mainstream media and your government. But I wonder how many people know that they're lying, or how many people are just stuck in that paradigm, thinking and believing the lie from the higher level, right? Like, how intentional is all this, do you think?
Well, it's kind of like, Orwell's 1984, when, these extreme lies are out there and they're fairly widely accepted. I think belief in the official story of 9/11 is kind of the proverbial mile wide and inch deep, although I don't think it's anywhere near a mile wide. It's maybe, half a mile wide. But if you sit down and talk with people about it, you'll get all kinds of different reactions according to the way the wind's blowing and the mood that they're in and, what kind of person they are. But I don't sense that, it's really, people really strongly believe it, except for this, rabid minority. When I was being witch hunted, the Capital Times newspaper sent out a reporter to go around to all the public places in Madison, Wisconsin, and get people's take on this. And apparently he was expecting that most of them would say, wow, this professor must be a real kook to think 9/11 was an inside job. But what he found was that, person after person after person said the same thing, which is it wouldn't surprise me, Bush, And so he was pretty surprised by that. But I wasn't really, because every other professor at Madison that I ever talked to about it, pretty much they all had the same reaction, which was, that really could be. It kind of looks that way. I don't want to look into it because it might be true.
So it's almost like the military industrial complex has almost become like a little war machine for the super rich to basically keep getting what they want as far back as we had major conflicts.
Yeah, I think it's kind of always been that way, really. I wrote an essay called Twilight of the Psychopaths, which is very, exaggerated in a way. It's kind of a rant. Every now and then I like to let loose with one of these rants. And this one says that, the psychopaths must have founded civilization. What Gandhi says, asked about Western civilization, he said, oh, that would be a good idea. In fact, civilization itself may have been created really by these, psychopaths who figured out how to brainwash people into becoming really, killers and thieves. And, they and their goons could go around and round up the surplus grain from the farmers, maybe, kill the farmers, use whatever violence they needed to use, get the grain, store it, and use it to hire even more thugs. And then the next year, they could extend the reach of their so-called taxation. And so that's probably how civilization started. So pretty soon, they've got this huge tower full of grain, and people are building houses around it. It becomes a city. And the psychopath in chief is the Hammurabi, or whatever he wants to call himself, and it's kind of been that way ever since, I think, because that's really what civilization began as this sort of organized pillage, and in a way it still is. And so the people who run it are the most ruthless people and the greediest people who want to climb to the top of this pyramid of pillage. But their problem is that mass literacy people have always been fighting back against it, but now they can organize better and they can become more aware and have better means of fighting back thanks to mass literacy and communication technology. So in this rant, I was saying we're at the end of the era of psychopath rule, and I hope I was right.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that until the internet came along, and now everything is kind of changing. At least more people are kind of waking up to other possibilities of our history and our path to the future. So how about you in the last 8 years or a decade since you've been doing this? You must have seen a lot of changes in awareness or how people talk about it, or the media. Do you want to talk about that a bit?
Well, yeah, I think, when I got involved in the 9/11 Truth Movement, that was the beginning of 2004. And at that time, there was still a real strong fear factor. When people brought up 9/11 in sort of any kind of off-color way, a lot of people would freak out. Yeah. You could just see the fear coming into their eyes.
Yeah.
and that's been slowly diminishing with time. And so that's one factor. And, in a way that works, it cuts in two ways. One is that when you turn somebody around when there's that much fear, then sometimes they become kind of, intense, and somebody who never would have been an activist becomes an activist. You turn somebody inside out on this when they're still emotionally wound up about it. And you can turn somebody from a fascist into a truth activist. And now that it's not so intense, it's a little less likely that when somebody opens their eyes to this, they're immediately going to devote their whole life to getting the word out. So in that sense, it's slowed down a little bit. But I do think that we've won the battle in one sense, which is that of the people who were aware enough to have really checked it out and looked at it and thought about it, and who know something about the controversy, practically all of them are truthers. I mean, there are very few people who've really taken a hard look at it and agreed with the official story. So I think we have most of the real critical thinkers on our side already. And it's, so we're going to end up with a sort of a fight between these neocon strategic genius psychopaths and whoever they've still got under control, mostly, relatively stupid people. And then all the people capable of thinking for themselves are going to be on the other side of the fight. And frankly, if I'm going to fight a war, I want to be on the side that's got a lot of people that can think for themselves. I think we have a pretty good shot at winning this thing in the long term.
Yeah, and I guess you've also seen the mainstream use the momentum and turn it into conspiracy, or turn the label of conspiracy on its head and push back that way a bit.
Well, all they can do is use character assassination and ad hominem attacks trying to kill the messenger, because the message itself is pretty irrefutable. Anybody with two synapses firing can look at Bob Bowman's 3-minute video called WTC7, the smoking gun. Google that if you haven't seen it yet. WTC7, the smoking gun. Mm-hmm. It's a 3-minute video. You can watch Building 7 coming down at free fall acceleration for a third of the way, and very close to it for the whole way. And you can see Larry Silverstein, the guy who bought the World Trade Center a couple of months before this disaster happened, doubled the insurance on these asbestos-ridden doomed buildings, these white elephants, and then confessed to having pulled or demolished Building 7 on camera. You see 3 minutes of that, and then you see the BBC report this obvious implosion of Building 7 20 minutes before it happened. And anybody with two synapses firing can see, okay, the truthers, it looks like the truthers are right. It's like 3 minutes. You don't even have to do a dissertation research project on it. And for that reason, it's a really good issue. Some of these other issues, like the Holocaust, for example, I'm still trying to figure that one out. There's a lot of historical work you have to do to really be sure of anything about that, and I'm not even sure yet. And there are a lot of other issues like that are fairly complex, and the sources are, filtered through how many different games of telephone you have to get back to the prime sources and what agenda do they have and so on. But with 9/11, so much of this stuff is right there in video. Anybody with eyes can see these are demolitions. Anybody with eyes and ears can hear Silverstein confessing. What more do you need?
Didn't the Rothschilds have a shipping company that fucking pulled out of their lease, paid a huge penalty to pull out of their lease 2 weeks before?
I forget whether I don't know whether the Rothschilds own Zim Shipping or not. I
thought they owned a percentage of it for some reason.
Well, they probably did. They own a percentage of a lot of things. But Zim Shipping was an Israeli-owned shipping company that broke its lease to move out of the Trade Center the week before 9/11. And they had a big bunch of the Trade Center, and they lost a ton of money to move out. And that looks pretty bad. There was also the Odaigo instant messaging forewarnings in the Hebrew language that went out on the morning of 9/11 saying, don't go to work in Lower Manhattan. And that was reported in Haaretz, which is Israel's best newspaper.
So can let's rewind it just a bit here. And let's, since we're jumping into 9/11 here, can we, for maybe, I don't think we'd have a ton of listeners, but for some listeners who really haven't heard anything, could you kind of give us a quick rundown of why 9/11 is obviously bull?
Right. Well, the first thing again is the easy way to get into this and to see that it's very, to convince yourself in 3 minutes that there's really a huge problem here is to look at those Building 7 issues. It's just such an obvious controlled demolition. It was the third building, the third skyscraper that came down at near free fall acceleration on 9/11.
Later on in the day, right?
Yeah, 6 hours later.
Yeah, it came down at 5:20 something in the afternoon, which was, the two towers came down at roughly 9:50 in the morning, and then 10:20 or something in the morning. But then it wasn't until 5:20 or so in the afternoon that Building 7 came down. And the problem with the Building 7 thing is, with the towers, they could, quote unquote, plausibly pretend that these buildings had somehow, quote unquote, collapsed due to some combination of, jet fuel fires and office fires and, the metal from the jet stripping off some of the fireproofing and all this nonsense. But, it's just not 100% instantly obvious that these are demolitions unless you're pretty, if you know something about high-rise architecture and you know something about physics, you can look at it and say, these, there's something really wrong here. In fact, a lot of people, even without that, can look at these towers and see there's a problem and see that they're exploding. But they don't look like normal controlled demolitions either. They look like something that's never been seen before. So, oh, well, it's something that's never been seen before. It's easy to just kind of block that out and imagine that it must be some, weird thing that happened because of the airplanes. But with Building 7, this is just an obvious classic controlled demolition. There's no question about it. The people that work the hardest to try and show that it just fell down the way the government said, tear their hair out and end up admitting they can't do it. Like Frank Greening was the man who was most cited by the debunkers for years. Greening is a Canadian scientist who was, he's tried to hold up the government's account of what happened to the towers, and he's become skeptical even of that. But now, even he comes right out and says, this government is just putting out complete nonsense about Building 7, and essentially admitting it's an obvious controlled demolition. So you look at Building 7 first, you see, wait a minute, okay, they did this controlled demolition, they lied about it, they covered it up. Once you see that Building 7 is definitely a controlled demolition, then you go back and look a little more closely at the towers, and you can see that they're exploding. They're not just falling. They're blowing up, and these huge, 100-ton steel structural elements are blasting upwards and outwards and flying 500 feet and impaling themselves in neighboring buildings. Gravity doesn't do that. And you can see that they're being pulverized. Most of what's in them is being turned into gravel and very fine dust and floating down very slowly, rather than, crunching down as concrete pieces. There's all sorts of problems with those two. So you see that and say, oh my goodness, okay, these 3 buildings are obvious controlled demolitions. We have all kinds of eyewitness testimony to that effect. Hundreds of first responders and firemen and policemen on radios talking about these obvious explosions that were going off as these things were being blown up. And pools of molten steel, fires from kerosene, which is what jet fuel is, and office paper do not melt steel. They don't even get close to it. Yet there were pools of molten steel that were still around weeks after these demolitions. And you can kind of go on like that for a long time. So essentially, you establish pretty easily that these 3 skyscrapers in New York were taken down in controlled demolitions, destroyed deliberately in such a way that they wouldn't topple over and wipe out neighboring buildings. Mm-hmm. So once you see that, then you say, okay, if that's the case, then what's the story with these planes that, if it wasn't the planes that brought the buildings down, what was the role of these planes? Well, once you admit that these are demolitions, you have to notice that these are extremely sophisticated high-tech demolitions. The towers were deceptive demolitions designed to make it look like they might have, collapsed due to structural damage and fire. And in order to do these kinds of demolitions, this was these were billion-dollar projects, very, very high-tech, and they would have invested incredible amounts of work into preparing the demolitions and into preparing the rest of this operation. Given that, there is no way that they would have just allowed these quote-unquote hijackers, the best pilots of which were so incompetent they couldn't even solo in a Cessna training aircraft. Now, they wouldn't just say, oh, we're going to let these guys take over planes and hit these targets, and then we're going to bring down these buildings and blame it on the planes. Now, obviously, they wouldn't do that because, even if there was a 1 in 100 chance that planes wouldn't hit buildings, right? If the planes aren't going to hit the buildings, you can't do the demolitions. So you have to be 100% sure that quote unquote planes are going to hit buildings. Right. So obviously that was a setup. Whatever they did to make it look like there were hijackings and plane crashes, those were not hijackings and plane crashes. But most likely they probably just flew some kind of drones into these targets. By remote control, because you couldn't trust a human pilot to do it. You couldn't be 100% sure that the human pilot was going to hit these. The world's best pilots can't hit the towers at the speeds these planes were supposedly going. In fact, the speeds that you see on the video were probably way beyond the capacity of the aircraft. The South Tower was hit at almost 600 miles an hour, and probably this plane would have broken apart at 500 miles an hour at sea level. They just can't go that fast. The engines probably couldn't have pushed it that fast either. So whatever happened, it was not like jetliners hijacked by guys who couldn't fly Cessnas, which is what the government tells us. So you establish that, and then you go and look at the Pentagon, and there's no evidence whatsoever that any big airliner hit the Pentagon, and all kinds of evidence that it didn't. And then you go look at Shanksville, where there was supposedly an airliner crash, and there's just this little 15-foot hole in the ground with a couple of little pieces of scrap metal that didn't even come from an airplane lying there. And the government tells us that plane just buried itself in the soft ground. Mm-hmm. They also claim that they dug out the passengers and did DNA tests on the passengers, and they tested all the passengers except for the hijackers. That's what they say, but there's not one shred of evidence that they ever disinterred any airplane at Shanksville. There's, wouldn't they have taken pictures of this? I mean, wouldn't somebody who did it talk about it? It never happened. So there's this 15-foot hole in the ground where they claim that a jetliner just disappeared into soft coal mining ground, just disappeared into the ground, left no trace except for a little 15-foot, 5-foot deep hole. and then we're just told that, oh yeah, well, at some later date, they somehow went and disinterred these people and DNA tested them without the slightest record of any kind of having ever done this. It's ridiculous. I mean, and every aspect of this story is completely ludicrous and unsupported by any real evidence. The notion that there were even these hijackers were even on the planes. There's not a shred of evidence that any of these hijackers were on any of these planes. So not one shred.
When we talk about Building 7, I remember seeing the debunking argument after that, because I'd watched some of the documentaries a few years back. And so what did the debunkers say about Building 7? Because I remember I wasn't convinced, but they definitely put up a pretty somewhat convincing argument. I mean, so can you...
Not anymore.
No, eh? So has it changed like over the last few years?
Oh, yeah, it's totally... Well, what happened was that, they just make stuff up. Mm-hmm. There's a part of the brain that goes into action defending any deeply held beliefs. Yeah. And it just makes people say whatever could possibly come out of their mouths that would, sound like it was defending that belief. And so that's what we had with Building 7 for a while. Oh, there was a diesel generator in the basement. And so these are people with no knowledge of the actual setup in Building 7, no knowledge of what actually happened. They never really studied it. They just make this stuff up. Counterpunch did this. Some people who should know better. Alexander Coburn, famously, did this huge rant about how it was obviously the diesel generators in the basements. Big diesel fire. Since there was a big diesel fire, somehow that's going to cause this building to magically fall down in perfectly symmetrical, like an elevator into the ground at free fall acceleration. Okay. But that was the best they could do was, diesel fire in the basements. Well, then when the government finally came out with its explanation, it admitted what every serious person, namely the 9/11 truthers, had been saying, which was that there were no diesel fires. That had nothing to do with it. They came up with a story that is so ridiculous that people like Frank Greening, who has been just desperate to find any way he can to possibly come up with the most far-fetched scientific hypothesis to support any of these official stories of these three buildings, throws up his hands and says these people are insane. The government, NIST gave us this story of quote unquote thermal expansion. They say that there was one particular beam, and there's this phenomenon called thermal expansion, which has never been seen before in history, never been observed anywhere on the planet at any time. But this phenomenon suddenly appeared miraculously out of nowhere on 9/11
because of a fire in the top of the building or whatever.
Yeah, because of fires, and so this beam expanded, and when the beam expanded, it dislodged another beam, and it was pretty much like a Rube Goldberg contraption, or like the dominoes falling or something. And so all of these different, beams basically dislodge each other, and then the whole thing just falls straight down. And it's so ridiculous that now there's nobody who seriously defends it anymore. And Greening, came on my radio show, just several months ago, and all but said, yeah, okay, you guys are right about Building 7.
Wow. So
yeah, it says here that Zim Shipping is owned half by the state of Israel and half by the Rothschilds.
Oh, there you go.
Well, that pretty much means all
perfect
by the Rothschilds.
Combination. Yeah.
State of Israel is the Rothschilds.
So being in the sort of in the truther movement and all that, I wonder how you guys were able to deal with all the different competing theories of your own, right? Like it must have been a challenge in a way because there's different factions of the truther movement. Like you've got the directed energy weapons, like the dustification of the buildings, and then the, controlled demolition. The planes are like holograms. I mean, how do you guys, was that challenging teasing through all those types of theories?
Well, yeah, I think some of those disputes are sort of, they function as traps to lure the unwary into being less than fully productive, because the kind of people who see through this stuff sometimes are kind of geeks, like with the Kennedy assassination, people who really got into every aspect of the single bullet theory and, could describe every little twist and turn that the magic bullet made as it, went through, Kennedy and Connolly, was it 5 times, made 6, perpendicular turns in the air as it did so, and could give you every last logistical reason why obviously there were multiple shooters in Dealey Plaza. Well, those kind of people became notorious as JFK geeks. And, certain kinds of people, try to avoid them at parties, like, oh, you guys are too geeky for us, go talk shop, conspiracy talk somewhere else. And so with 9/11, that happens where, people get fascinated by this and they try to figure, well, how in the heck did they simulate these airliner crashes? I think every sensible person in the 9/11 truth movement agrees that these were simulated, hijackings and plane crashes. There were no hijackings and plane crashes. Something was done to simulate a hijacking and plane crash. Now, how did they do it? Did they just fly 757 or 767 into the towers, 757 into the Pentagon? Doesn't look like it because the 767 wouldn't go that fast. Well, then what did they do? Did they dress up some kind of military plane as a 767 and fly it in there at 600 miles an hour? Or did they, cloak a cruise missile in a hologram, as some people say? Or did they just, blow up the building and fake it on video and assume that people would have screen memories, which people do when they see it on TV? If you're in New York and you see on TV that this happens, you're very likely to, at least some people are going to remember having actually seen it in real life. So if you just put this on TV, you would be absolutely certain that of the 10 million people in New York, a sizable number would, quote unquote, remember. They would claim to remember having actually seen a plane hitting a building. And so there are people who take all of these different approaches. And I don't know. I mean, the important thing to me is that it's just, we've proven that this was a military operation. It wasn't hijackers. Almost certainly wasn't a normal 767. I mean, isn't that enough? Now let's get these guys in and waterboard them and find out how they did it, right? But some people just really get into the arcane details of how it was done, and sometimes that can be very divisive and kind of frustrating. When you start getting on their chain email lists.
Yeah, and really, it shouldn't even matter. Like you're missing the big picture is that somebody did it or is willing to take those kind of steps.
Well, yeah. And I think more important really than all the details of how it was done is why it was done. And, what's the real meaning of this in history? And, that's a fascinating topic. I mean, you can look at 9/11 as a mass human sacrifice designed to launch war. There's a whole sort of esoteric Western tradition of human sacrifice. There's an analysis of sacrifice by René Girard, one of our greatest philosophers.
I read somewhere that Afghanistan and Iraq were the two only countries that didn't have Rothschild-owned banks in them. Is there any truth to that?
Well, Afghanistan, I'm sure, didn't, and actually Iraq probably didn't either. But I don't think Iran's bank is Rothschild-owned. I don't think Gaddafi was Rothschild-owned, although I think he was starting to hobnob with them a little bit. But I'm not sure it was quite that simple. I understand that there are those who say that Japan's postal bank is the biggest non-Rothschild bank in the world, and there's people speculate about the Fukushima disaster having been payback for their refusing to sell their postal bank to the Rothschilds and the rest of the international bankster interests. There was a threat made to attack Japan with an earthquake weapon that was revealed by, wasn't the prime minister, one of the top Japanese leaders in December of that year. And then Fukushima hit in the spring.
Wow.
There are people who think that might be some kind of earthquake weapon, but I don't know. But with, I think it's probably also a geostrategic thing. We learned from General Wesley Clark that shortly after 9/11, he learned that the real plan was to attack and do regime change in 7 countries in 5 years. And the 7 countries were all opponents of Israel, starting with Iraq and going through Libya, Sudan, Lebanon, Syria, and what did I miss? I don't know. Ending in Iran that was the big kahuna. Oh, they were going to get Sudan and Somalia as well. And so if you look at the 7 countries that 9/11 was intended to take out, they've really trashed most of them. They just utterly trashed Iraq. It's a disaster area full of DU. They destroyed Libya. They destroyed Sudan and broke it into 2 countries. They stole all the resources of Sudan by breaking it off and creating an Israeli-ruled so-called South Sudan. They have destabilized Lebanon. They're currently in the process of destroying Syria. So that whole 7 countries in 5 years plan that General Wesley Clark revealed, I think was probably a big part of the motivation for 9/11. And so that means it was really the Israelis, and of course the Rothschilds are the Israelis, who wanted to use the U.S. military to destroy the opponents of Israel. And I think they not only intended to do those 7 countries in the 5 years, now it's of course taken longer than 5 years, but they also wanted to launch a 100 years war against the enemies of Israel. And essentially the whole Islamic world is an enemy of Israel because, what is Israel? It's occupied Palestine. Palestine has been Muslim administered Holy Land ever since Islam existed. It's like occupying Palestine. That's like if the Muslims went and invaded and occupied the Vatican, or Rome, and ethnically cleansed and murdered the people of Italy. It would not be very popular among Christians, and Christians would obviously be the enemy of that, occupation state in Italy. Well, that's what's happening with the Zionist occupied Palestine is, it's never going to be accepted by the world's 2 billion Muslims. So it's a recipe for eternal war. And I think 9/11 was really designed to make the whole West an accomplice in Israel's war against Islam.
So that's just fascinating. I'm also fascinated by what we're going to think in the future.
The CIA gets the poppy fields to keep their mouth shut.
Oh yeah, everybody makes money off it, of course. So everybody's making money. But I think the big strategic reason is to create Islam as the new enemy to replace the Cold War communist enemy. And the big beneficiary is Zionism.
A lot of money to be made. War is a pretty profitable industry.
Well, that's right. Yeah, it's a parasite industry, just like banking.
Yeah.
You don't have to really produce anything. If you can sell gold-plated toilet seats. You get all the money you want from the taxpayers. And likewise, in banking, you've got compound interest, which just automatically, mathematically brings more and more of the money in the system into your own hands.
Yeah, creating it out of thin air. Yeah.
That's right. The banking and the military industrial complex are the 2 great parasites, and they use all this money that they suck up to impose their power on the rest of us.
You could add the pharmaceutical industry in there too. Make it 3.
Well, yeah, maybe they're starting to rule through pharmaceuticals for all I know.
So what do you think, looking back on this in 20 years, like I'm fascinated by what we're going to see looking back in history, like 20 years or 30 years after 9/11. But you being so involved in this, how long do you think it's going to take now that we have so much momentum in a way to this sort of being acknowledged as, like, does there have to be a massive collapse before that happens?
Well, that's a good question. I think a collapse might end up triggering sort of a glasnost or perestroika moment when we can face the truth.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah. It happened in Argentina. For a while, Argentina was under the thumbs of fascist generals. And it wasn't until they lost the war in the Falkland Islands and the Argentine economy crashed that people got fed up and overthrew the generals. And once they had overthrown those generals, then they could expose and prosecute their war crimes. And so we're going to need that kind of regime change here. As long as we have the regime that did 9/11 in power, it is going to do what's necessary to prevent any kind of punishment ever being really dished out for this, or any kind of official acknowledgement of the truth. So I think we need regime change first. I don't think this regime is going to allow us to destroy it by bringing out the truth. So we have to kind of do it in reverse order. And I mean, yes, telling the truth and pushing for the truth undermines the regime. And it's a huge factor in, leading to the point when we're going to have that regime change that will allow us to get the truth out. But we need to think of it that way. We need to think of this as we need to overthrow this whole regime, and 9/11 truth is one part of overthrowing it, but it won't ever be universally acknowledged until we have overthrown it. So what's going to happen? What will happen that will allow a regime change here? Well, collapse is quite likely. The petrodollar is really shaky, and petrodollar empire is really what's propping up this whole imperial power system. That is that now the Saudis allow the banksters to control the price of oil, and they force countries to buy oil in U.S. dollars, which means that whoever prints the U.S. dollars can command the labor of everybody around the world. But that's going to end. More and more countries are trading in commodities and other currencies. So petrodollar empire collapses, the U.S. economy collapses. And
Bitcoins.
Yeah, right. Well, I like Bitcoin. When people recognize that, there's when the misery level reaches a certain point, we get to 50% unemployment, 70% unemployment, 500% inflation, 5,000% inflation, that kind of stuff. When it hits that level, people might very well say, wait a minute, who pushed us into these disastrous wars that we've lost? Let's face it. Everybody knows at some level we've actually lost these wars. The U.S. didn't get anything out of Iraq and Afghanistan. No. We're fleeing with our tails between our legs, and the Taliban's going to end up in charge of Afghanistan.
Well, and there's no way to win them either, right? They're unwinnable wars, really.
Well, they are, and I don't think they're really ever meant to be won. They were meant, this is all just to destabilize these countries, not to do anything constructive. So at some point, people are going to wake up and say, wow, they've destroyed our country. We're all out of work. We're all starving. We have nothing left to lose, and they're going to storm the gates with the pitchforks.
Or they're going to shift the threat, right? Like you hear in the conspiracy circles a bit that the threat will change from terrorism to either the environment or, extraterrestrials or whatever the next unsustainable, threat will be.
It wouldn't surprise me. They're capable of just about anything. I mean, the ET thing, that does still strike me as a little far-fetched. Not that I doubt that there may be some, ETs or something like them out there. I actually think there probably are, and there probably is a cover-up. But selling that as a, let's unify Earth under the New World Order to stop the ETs, that's a big, but I didn't think they could
getting out there.
That's pretty far out. But yeah, maybe that's my generation. Maybe the newer generation has been so acclimatized to UFOs with the X-File stuff that maybe it would work. I don't know. I
mean, that could almost be the only thing to save a collapse. Like if we keep going at this pace and this momentum, something big's gotta shift. So I don't know.
Yeah, I would think so. But I don't know where it's all going to go, and I actually kind of hope we don't have a really huge violent collapse here, just out of, selfish concern for my family and neighbors, and the rest of the people here. I mean, I'd like to see it happen gently. And, boy, I just, I don't know how it will, but let's
do you think we'll see some sort of significant change in our lifetime?
Well, we're seeing big changes already. Just the rise of the alternative media is already changing the world. So when it all really kicks in and the sort of dominant consciousness changes and flips, and suddenly it's just everybody knows that the mainstream viewpoint is on its way out. It's, the shrinking minority that's going to be gone tomorrow. I don't know when that day is going to come, but we're heading in that direction.
Yeah, I think it's going to happen possibly faster than we think.
Yeah, these things kind of have tipping points sometimes, you don't know it's the tipping point until it happens.
Yeah, exactly. You don't get much of a warning.
Right. Well, listen, I have to hang up here and go do some homeschooling with my sons, but it's been great. I appreciate your very interesting perspectives. I'm going to have to try and catch your show more often.
So that was our chat with Kevin Barrett. What'd you think, Darren?
Just bugging you. It was a good one. It definitely was a lot more than just 9/11 stuff. That's for sure. That's quite the rabbit hole.
Yeah, man. When you go down to all the false flags in history.
Basically all nothing but false flags.
Yeah. No, I had a chat with somebody the other day, and when I bring up stuff like this, like that, this was a false flag or that was a false flag, or even the fact that there is false flags, like it's almost harder to believe for people than like UFOs or paranormal activity, this type of conspiracy, this type of level of conspiracy. I mean, I think it's opening up, but this is hard for people to believe.
Yeah, exactly. And I wonder if all that shit always comes out, then who knows? I
was just listening to a guy
That's
on
revolution
THC.
Shit.
On THC today, and he was talking about how he heard he was watching the towers before they fell, because he was like 15-20 blocks away in 9/11, and he saw or heard on the news that the towers had fallen, and he looked out and they hadn't fallen yet. So this is like a guy's personal account of how something was fucking screwed up with the timing.
Yeah, you hear all kinds of stuff like that. It's definitely, there's a couple good documentaries out there.
So what do you think of it, though? You think there's a lot to this?
Yeah, I think for sure there is. 100%.
More so than you would have thought a couple years ago?
Yeah, I think I always thought it was fucked up. It's just for a while there, it was kind of like, touchy ground. You know what I mean? That's like talking about Sandy Hook conspiracies. It's like,
Yeah, it's touchy.
It's touchy.
Hey, just wait. We're going to get more touchy even coming up.
There's got to be a better way to say that. But thanks a lot to Dr. Kevin Barrett for coming on. Of course, we'll link to all his stuff and his show in the show notes.
We got some more controversial topics coming up.
Yeah, there's always some controversy in Grimerica, it seems. Anyway, up next we'll be having, or we just booked Robert Schock. He's not up next.
Yeah.
Actually,
and I just dropped off your the book for you there that I got at the Paradigm, Forgotten Civilization.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'll start busting into that. He'll be. I think we're doing the interview April 8th, so I got a bit of time. I'm fucking bogged down in books right now. In the middle, I'm just finishing up the Moon book. I've got what's his name? Greg Taylor from the Daily Grail. I'm about a third of the way through.
I didn't know you were reading that.
Yeah, what's it called again?
Don't fear.
Oh yeah, there probably
is
is an afterlife. Yeah, I'm about a third of the way through that. And then I just finished Hoodwinked on audio. I'm halfway.
I just finished that too.
I'm halfway through Estelin's book, Transevolution.
Which you just got the hard copy, and so you're reading that on Kindle, and I've got the hard copy to take home. So I've got like 5 days to read that.
Oh, you got a week.
A week.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's an easy read.
Plus, I got to put aside the other 3 books I'm reading.
Yeah, it's less TV, more reading. That's good for you. Good for the brain.
Yeah.
Brain food.
Have you listened to The Secret Empire? What is that one? The
No, I still got that. That I haven't even touched.
That's that other
yet.
John Perkins book, right?
I got Confessions on audio, so I'll be able to blast through that. But yeah, big thanks to the folks over at Booth Media for sending us Daniel Estelin's book. He'll be our next guest after Jim Harold.
And we're also going to have Dr. Don Easterbrook on at that same day, right? Aren't we?
Yeah,
We're
he'll
doing
probably
a double header, kind of.
Yeah, Don will come out the week after Esterbrook, though. Or sorry, Estelin.
Right. Okay. Cool. So yeah, lots of good shows coming up.
Yeah, lots of gooders. Of course, we'll have the Passport episode coming up March 29th. I think we're going to schedule it for probably like, I don't know, we'll probably just kind of be around all night, do a barbecue or something, and kind of leave it open from maybe like 5 to 10 or 4 to 10 p.m. or something like that.
Yeah.
Do a call here and there and do another.
Yeah, because we're going to have, so that'll be actually easier. We can leave it open and give people a wide range of times, right? Because we're going to do the meditation podcast that day too. So we'll be in studio for a couple hours in the early afternoon.
Yeah, so basically, I think that'll be the day. It's a Saturday, March 29th. Basically, we probably make pretty well anything work. So I've got a few people lined up already, but there's still lots of room. So shoot us an email, tweet, Facebook us.
Uncle Dave, let us know if you want to come on.
Yeah, and of course, we've got our buddy who joined us in the intro, Jared, running our Facebook page now. So make sure you go over there and say hello.
All right, thanks. And if you have any feedback for us, please email at mine's graham@grimerica.com.
How's the Graham email bomb going? Did you get any yet?
Yeah, I got a couple.
All right, guys, keep them coming. Keep the emails. Let's keep the Graham@Grimerica email bombs going.
Just don't spell it the way Darren says my name.
GRAHAM@Grimerica.com. Let's see if we can get them 1,000 fucking emails this week. And of course, we'll have links to everything we talked about in the intro and with Kevin in the show notes, as well as all the music you heard. You got anything else before we go, Grab?
No, that's it, buddy. Thanks a lot.
All right, guys. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next week. I guess we won't see you, but you'll hear us.